Greetings KeyForgers, I hope you are all well. Today's going to be a slightly different video. I'm going to be referring to update 14 from the KeyForge GameFound campaign that Ghost Galaxy is running. And this update was titled Celebration 2022. Now it should be noted this was released on the 8th of October and I'm recording this video on the 11th of October. So 3 days have passed since this update did come out. As you can see here, it is a screenshot of the actual email that came through, and one of the things that I did pick up on was obviously Celebrations 2022, but underneath it says learn about KeyForge Celebration and get an early peek at the new official KeyForge tournament rules. So I thought, okay, they've put these down in stone. These are going to be the new rules, so I was right in there. I'm really excited to see what they were, because organised play is such a huge thing that's going to keep KeyForge alive. So when we click into it and we scroll down, it says there that they've been busy. This was written at the Essen Spiel trade show in Germany, where they've been working with a lot of people to help bring the localized language versions that were a stretch goal to life. And then they're pleased to announce KeyForge Celebrations 2022, which is taking part on November the 11th and 13th. Now, considering this was released on the 8th of October, that is only just over a month's notice. So for me, who lives in the UK, not very realistic that I can attend, unfortunately, because I would have really liked to. It tells us where it takes place, and it's near the offices for Ghost Galaxy. It says that KeyForge Celebration attendees will be able to see previews of Winds of Exchange and perhaps catch a whiff of Unchained, and then meet the Ghost Galaxy team in person and participate in the new KeyForge tournaments. Now, it's only here that it says Ghost Galaxy will be testing our new tournament formats at the event. So all of a sudden, I've got a bit of contradiction, because the email told me these were the new tournament events, and now it's saying we'll be testing our new tournament events. But this one still doesn't say that they're subject to change. And it goes on to say that KeyForge Celebration is envisioned as an annual event in which the KeyForge World Championships will take place in the future, starting in 2023. And you can click there to find out more about tickets and how they can be purchased. Now, I hadn't actually clicked through there to start because I was pretty much looking for the tournament formats, and here they are. So what I'm going to do is click through, and then we'll go through and we'll talk about what the majority of people are talking about at the moment, and that's how they've changed the format of the tournaments that we have been living with for the past, well, since KeyForge came out, really. This pop-up happens, and on mobile you can't get rid of it, which is slightly annoying. Now the yellow box here, which is dated the 6th of October, which is 2 days before I received the email and the announcement about these changes, and I believe everyone else did as well. It says the tournament formats presented below are currently in preliminary state and undergoing testing, such as during the 2022 KeyForge Celebration. They may be subject to substantial change prior to December 31st, 2022. Now, one of my big questions there was, that's quite ambiguous when you're going to close the pledge manager at the end of October 2022. But I'll go through that in a second. What I first saw was Sealed, Archon and Alliance, and I thought, great, Sealed staying, Archon staying. I don't really know what Alliance is, but the fact there's only 3 makes it a lot more manageable for a lot more stores as well, and people tend to play Archon and Sealed the most, I'm guessing, just by what we're playing in the UK at the moment and what we're having to do because we've got no more product releases. And even Sealed is drying up a little bit. If we click into Sealed, the first thing it says is 2 sealed KeyForge decks. Now, this can be a big issue if this is going to be organised play at store level. Now, they haven't specifically stated that. This is just for KeyForge Celebration. And I think that is one of the things that Ghost Galaxy is missing, is the communication of saying, yes, these will be store events as well, or no, they won't be store events, these are just for special events. And I couldn't find that anywhere. It says here that players simultaneously open their sealed decks and construct a single deck by selecting 3 house pods from the 6 house pods provided in the 2 sealed decks. So all of a sudden it jumped out to me, this is kind of like constructed. I thought of something like Magic Jumpstart or even the Soulforge, which hasn't even been released yet, where you're mashing 2 decks together. And all of a sudden I thought, why do that? The deck itself is already unique, and if I'm mashing two decks together, and someone let me know in the comments below if this is not true, but the way the algorithm works is that each deck is individual. Now, the slight differences between decks can be quite little. So if I'm mashing two decks together, there's a chance I'm not creating another unique deck. I might just be creating a copy of another deck. I know it's probably very small, the chance of that happening, but again, I can envision that happening. Also, from a store level perspective, two decks, you're going to double the price of a sealed event. If we say that a deck of KeyForge cards is around $8.99, say $9, £9 because it's about the same now, you're almost looking about £20 plus a little bit more if you're looking at maybe an event fee. So all of a sudden you might have outpriced quite a lot of people by introducing the two sealed KeyForge deck variation here. It goes into elimination rounds, it goes into deck calibration. Between each round of a sealed tournament, before being seated with the next opponent, players may calibrate their deck by substituting one or more house pods from their deck with one or more of their unused house pods. That means I can pretty much change my deck. Those two decks I've got, that's a huge sideboard. As long as I've got three separate houses, and it says one or more decks. So I could just use one of the sealed decks. Then it goes into player, brackets, and I started to get a little bit despondent when I read this, because I was like, that's not what KeyForge is. It's always been advertised as you grab one deck and you play it. Sealed is one of my all-time favourite formats. I love playing it because, unlike Archon, it's almost a level ground. Everyone's playing with a deck they haven't played with before. And I find that sealed matches tend to be a lot of fun. There's a lot of banter between players. If I'm having to worry about changing my deck, all of a sudden, I'm not getting better at playing the same deck. You learn from your deck. You play it once and you're like, okay, my deck can do that, it can't do that, so I'm going to have to play it this way. If people keep chopping and changing their decks, one, it's going to increase the time in between rounds. And if a game goes to time, you're going to need to give some allotted amount of time to those players to change their decks if they want to. And I'm pretty sure you're going to have to make that standard. Anyway, that was sealed. And I thought, okay, sealed, what about Archon? Archon? 3 KeyForge Archon decks. I'm like, okay, triad. Players are eliminated after losing 2 matches, also known as double elimination. So you lose 2, you're out. Elimination rounds continue until only 8 players remain. You present your decks to your opponent, or your ready decks, and we'll get into that in a second. Players will simultaneously disqualify one of their decks, which cannot be used. And then they select a deck from their remaining decks. Now, exhausted decks, if you've used a deck and it won in the previous round, it is now exhausted for the next round. So going into round 2, you've got 1 exhausted deck, and you've got 2 decks, and your opponent's actually going to say you can't use one of them, so you have no choice but to use that 3rd deck. Decks only remain exhausted for 1 round, so you can use them in the next round, but technically you're playing with only 1 deck, and it's only really the first round where you get to pick from 2, because you will always have 1 exhausted. When you hit the playoff rounds, they're considered all unexhausted, regardless of what you won your last match with. And then I saw down the bottom here that a deck that has won a playoff match is exhausted for the remainder of the playoffs and cannot be used again. So you're basically stuck with your other 2 decks. I think it's kind of complicated, if I could put it like that, but that might just be my mind. It does prevent people from using the same strong deck and just taking 2 other basic decks because they know their strong deck is always going to win. And they haven't involved an aspect of deck building within this one. So though they've changed Archon from 1 deck to 3 decks, there's no deck building in here. Then we get to Alliance. 1 KeyForge Alliance deck consists of 3 house pods recruited from a player's collection of Archon decks. So we're talking about every single set that's been printed so far. If you have that deck, you can use it. Now it says here, 3 house pods in the Alliance deck may be recruited from up to 3 different Archon decks. So actually, you could just take 1 Archon deck. It goes into what a house pod is, so it's a set of 12 cards dedicated to one house in a single Archon deck. And then it goes into elimination rounds. It's a double elimination like Archon. But in the playoffs, it says that each playoff match is won by best of 3 games. Best of 3. That's a serious time commitment in the playoff rounds. They haven't specified the time frame for each round. If we're going with Archon, it's going to be 35 minutes. So all of a sudden you're looking at an hour and 45 for a playoff round if everything goes to time. But it's not just the final, it's every playoff round. So it's going to be a long day. Very long day. But again, it introduces this level of deck building in a unique card game which prized itself on you only need to buy one deck to play. I'm going to give you an example now of how Alliance is actually going to be very broken. OTK, on turn kill decks. One turn kill decks, whatever they're calling it these days. Decks that can win on their turn by forging 3 keys. And yes, it might be flashing across your head now. Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic. These are the sort of constructed card games that do this. There are a few KeyForge decks that can do this, but not to the level that they will be able to now. Say you've got Star Alliance, Logos, and Untamed. Now I'm sure this combination already exists in quite a unique deck, but imagine in Star Alliance you have United Actions. Imagine in Logos you have Library Access. And then imagine you have Key Charge in Untamed. United Action allows you to play cards, but not use cards, but from any house. If you then played Library Access, you draw a card whenever you play a card. As long as you've got 7 actions in your deck that have Amber Pip, you will be able to cycle your deck and play Key Charge 3 times in one turn. Now I checked through my own personal collection. I can make this deck with different decks 7 times. So say I play one tournament and I win, I will just take one of those houses out and replace it with another house. So actually I've got quite a lot of combinations of OTK decks I can play just with that combination. That is not fun in KeyForge for a lot of people, myself included, and I will not be participating in Alliance format because people will find combinations like the one I've just described. You might not even need a time limit on the round, because if someone's going to win within 5 minutes, especially if you can find a Logos house that has Library Access, that has a lot of draw in it, something that will allow you to cycle your deck a lot, you're going to draw into it quite quick. I can envision a lot of people turning up with decks like that, and then other people turning up with decks that are going to try and counter those decks. You'll have decks with Quixelstone and Ettin's Jar. And you might Ettin's Jar one of their combination cards, in which case the other player might just go, yeah, GG, well done. Or they might have actually, if they thought about it, chose an Untamed house with Reclaimed by Nature in it in a Key Charge. Being able to draw from 5 different sets, or 6 when Winds of Exchange comes out, makes the possibility very, very scary. And what happens if you choose Unfathomable? Do you use the Tide card? What happens if you bring a Dark Tidings deck, but then you make your pod out of the other 2 decks? Do you still use the Tide card because it's still part of your 3 decks? These things I feel need to be clarified, but I don't feel that this Alliance format is going to take off that well. I can totally see why Ghost Galaxy have made an Alliance format, and it kind of ties into what I really want to talk about, is they're trying to open up KeyForge to a wider market, and what they're really focusing on is trying to get people who play constructed deck building TCGs, CCGs, and draw them to KeyForge. KeyForge in its hiatus lost a lot of players, especially in our area, to Flesh and Blood. They might not be interested in playing a deck that they can't tamper with. So it is a big marketing push towards people who want to play constructed. Conversely, it goes pretty much in the face of what KeyForge was originally designed for, which was unique decks, and now you're saying that you can mash these together. I can totally see where Ghost Galaxy is coming from when they put this out. Do I feel that they may have overstepped? Completely. Because it's very ambiguous about these set of tournament formats and if they're going to stay. The feedback and the comments that I've been reading online are overwhelmingly pretty much negative about deck construction within KeyForge, and people are very, very angry, especially the fact that they've changed them after they've already taken the money for all the pledges. I myself am very nervous about my pledge. I have no interest in playing a sealed tournament or an alliance tournament where I get to mix my decks together. That's heading too much into the realms of Magic for me. And that's one reason why I stepped away from Magic. I used to net deck. I was terrible at deck building. I didn't like it. You could pay to win. And in a sense you can in KeyForge. But we had the chains and the power system which allowed people not to turn up with the same deck to tournaments. How are they going to do it with these? Does all three decks get chains when you take them to Alliance? Does it get a power level? Or is it a combination? So actually I can just switch one house out and all of a sudden it's become a new deck. I'm not going to get into the second Amber yet. It's just an additional tournament that will happen if you get knocked out of the first one. What I want to show you now is the KeyForge Celebrations 2022 and how that is again contradicting what is written on that other page. Tickets cost $75. That's quite a hefty price, so I would assume what you get in your goodie bag is pretty nice. But for someone like myself in the UK, and with a very short notice about KeyForge Celebrations happening, I will not be able to make it over there. If we have a look here, why attend KeyForge Celebration? You've got a keynote presentation from Ghost Galaxy. It says a KeyForge sealed tournament, which I checked will cost you an extra $25 to enter. An Alliance tournament, an Archon tournament, the second Amber, which they're calling Constellation tournaments. Previews of the new KeyForge Winds of Exchange set. And then it says the very first unrestrained, entirely broken, madness-inducing, ultra-casual event featuring KeyForge Unchained decks. There's an even harder version of Rise of the Key Racking to play, and it's talking about casual play there as well. Now, what I did was I clicked on all of these. So if we look at the sealed tournament, it says there 4 PM to 11 PM. It says, as the major kickoff event for KeyForge Celebration, we're thrilled to be hosting a major sealed deck tournament with the new and shiny KeyForge Winds of Exchange decks. And I was like, hang on, that wasn't mentioned. As a backer, I thought I would be getting Winds of Exchange first, and that's why I backed the campaign. I wanted to be the first people to say I've got Winds of Exchange deck, and now there's people on November the 11th who are going to be able to get KeyForge Winds of Exchange decks. Again, it's pod building, but that's 2 Winds of Exchange decks that you're going to get. So as a backer, this did annoy me quite a bit as well, because there are people who may not have backed the campaign and have just gone to KeyForge event to be able to get these new decks. You have open play and then the Unchained duel. If I click on that, that's 4:30 till 11. You will get 1 Unchained deck in your goodie bag. And then you wear a badge and then people can challenge you. And you can report your score. And if you lose 2 matches, you're eligible to purchase another Unchained deck to continue your chainless journey. How many times can that happen? I can envision a lot of players reporting false results just to get new Unchained decks. And again, as a backer, the fact that someone else is going to get Unchained decks before me, I feel a little bit put out. If I go back to this sealed tournament just for a second, it tells you there are 15 people attending. So 15 people have already signed up for that sealed tournament. If we then go to the next day and we look at the Alliance tournament, bearing in mind this is 3 days after the announcement, there is only 1 person attending the Alliance tournament. So hopefully that goes to show that people do not want to play the Alliance format. The core group of KeyForge players who stuck with it through the hiatus, through the pandemic, don't like to play constructed. So if I was working at Ghost Galaxy, I'd be a little bit concerned that I've only got one person signed up for an Alliance tournament. If we look at Archon, 4 people attending. There's only 4 people attending the Triad. Sorry, the Archon. I'm going to keep getting the name wrong. The big draw seems to be I'm going to get my hands on new Winds of Exchange decks before anyone else. And then Sunday continues again. You've got your sealed final 8. So these tournaments are actually played over a few days. Do I feel that Ghost Galaxy have not communicated this properly? Yes. Do I understand why they've done it? Yes. Do I think it's right at this particular time? No, I don't. And I actually thought long and hard about this update. And it actually kept me up at night. I couldn't sleep. So I thought I'm going to put my comments down. And I'll show you those now. What I wrote here was, this notice states subject to substantial change until December 31st, 2022. And I put, that it's good you have made this clear, but considering the drastic changes suggested for OP and the almost overwhelmingly negative response. Now there are some people who like the idea, but the majority that I read didn't. It says, I feel that this should be addressed before the pledges are finalised at the end of October. Myself, like many others, were drawn to KeyForge because of its uniqueness. Introducing new formats is great, but please consider leaving Archon and Sealed untouched. I feel that without clarity on this matter before the pledge manager closes, will likely cause a vast number of reduced or cancelled pledges. I would hate to see the game I love fail after such a successful campaign. Now, there might be a little bit harsh words, but I couldn't sleep. I do feel that they need to clarify store level tournaments, and if something like Chainbound and Sealed is going to remain the same. Like I said, your local friendly game store might see a dip in participation. 2-deck Sealed is expensive. A lot of KeyForgers that I've spoken to don't like deck construction. And if they're going to make this Triad Archon an event to be held in stores, we play in the evenings. We play from 7 o'clock and the store closes at 10. 3-deck Archon is not going to work in that short space of time. But like I said, these are just my views and my feelings on what they have released. Do I feel they should post an update clearing up a lot of the questions that people have? I do, and I'm surprised they haven't done it yet. I really expected to wake up Monday morning to an update, to clarify, to maybe a frequently asked questions that we can just look at and feel a little bit more reassured. I myself put down a rather large pledge. I went top of the pledge line, turner of keys, and I added a lot of add-ons because I love KeyForge. The direction it's taking, I really did enjoy it up until this point of ambiguity, and I do hope that they're able to clarify these before the pledge manager closes at the end of October, which is what they've stated. There will be people out there who love this idea, and great. I hope they do keep some of these formats, but don't get rid of the old formats. The formats that actually kept the game alive during the pandemic. I feel I've spoken enough. Those are my thoughts. All that remains for me to say is good luck, have fun, and keep forging.